Today on the channel, the top 10 lists continue, as today I'm counting down my personal top 10 McFarlane Toys figures of 2022.
The spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
Welcome everyone, Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another year-end top 10 list. As today, we're counting down my McFarlane Toys top 10 figures of 2022. And I just put the cattle away, so I'm ready to dive into this set here and talk about my 10 favorites. Now, when I say McFarlane Toys, we're looking at Spawn figures, we're looking at DC Multiverse figures, we're looking at Mortal Kombat figures, and we're looking at a couple other properties as well. As we do know, McFarlane Toys, he truly is the hardest working man in the toy business, as it seems like every single week he is releasing new figures somewhere. We do know 2023, he's got a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle license now, so there is no end in sight for McFarlane Toys. Now, I am not the biggest fan, I'm going to play that out right now. I am not the biggest fan of McFarlane Toys like I am Marvel Legends, WWE Elites, Ultimates, AEW, things like that. But you guys that have followed along on the channel over the last couple of years, you know I dabble. I do enough to be dangerous. I pick and choose a lot of my DC ones I really do like. I'm pretty much 100% complete on all the Spawn figures, and I dabble from other lines as well from McFarlane Toys. So as I always do say, this is my list. This is my top 10. Make sure you put your top 10 list in the comments down below. Make sure you put them in order. And like I said, this is my list, so it's going to be my 10 favorite here that I came across in 2022. So without further ado, let's kick it off, and let's start it off at number 10. All right, we kick off the top 10 McFarlane Toys of 2022 as voted by me with a little bit of Spawn figures. And this one was an interesting one, as this could have been a little bit higher on my list if they would have tweaked a few things. But this was very interesting and got my attention from the get-go. What Spawn figure is it? Well, it is Spawn with Throne. Yes, garbage Throne Spawn here. And this is one of the interesting ones from the Spawn line, is a lot of the Spawn figures we've seen at Target stores, we've seen all over the place. Really, the only place I've been seeing in my area, this one is at GameStop. And some of you guys have been able to play that long game and get him on a discount this year. But I was accustomed to him, or accustomed to these guys, usually going to Target. This one, not really in my area. So that was a very interesting distribution. It could be an issue. We might see him rear his ugly head maybe in 2023 at the Target stores. We'll see what happens there. But an interesting one. It is cool to get a Throne, and we do know McFarlane, he loves a good Throne. He gives them with Lex Luger, he gives them with Black Adam, he gives them with other characters, and Spawn included. This is a little bit more of a deluxe Throne. It is very cool, and it really is big part of the selling piece for this one, as we have had better Spawns from McFarlane in 2022 and beyond. This Spawn is really good. It's a very classic looking Spawn, but when you take him outside of his Throne, he just seems very unfinished with the short cape. It's like they just got halfway done with him and walked away. So it really is the total package. Either of these two by themselves, they're not in the top 10. You put them together, they barely squeak in. They come in at number 10, year-end countdown list. Number 9 spot in our countdown here. And number 9, we venture over to the DC Multiverse. And we venture into the big mega figures. You guys know I love a big figure. And I had very, very high expectations for this figure. And I gotta say, while good, while I do like this, it did not really meet my expectations as much as I hoped it would be. And who are we talking about? We're talking about the DC Multiverse. We're talking about Clayface. Looks like he just crawled out of the sewer, really, is how he looks here. And I was a little bit disappointed because I had high expectations for this to be much like the Spawn Violator. If you guys have had that Spawn Violator figure, truly a next level figure, possibly the greatest Spawn figure that's ever been produced. It's that good of a figure, if you ask me. So I expected Clayface to have that big, chunky, heavy feel, and unfortunately he is very light, very hollow in the middle. He is deluxe, he is big, he does look cool, but he just feels very cheap compared to some of the other mega figures. But one thing that really helped bring him into the top 10, because without this, I think he'd be somewhere in between 10 and 20 for me. But one thing I like to do with this guy is, and you guys have probably seen, Arise, Serpentor Arise from the G.I. Joe a Real American Hero cartoon back in the day. Do you remember when we had the Serpentor Arise, the dawning of Serpentor? And Serpentor kind of looked like this for a brief while when the DNA went crazy and all that stuff. So it's really cool. You could really mix him into your G.I. Joe collection if you really wanted to as that one. So that is one thing that I was like, man, that is cool. I might move him over to that shelf. We'll see what happens. Might have Dr. Mindbender working on him a little bit. Who knows? So that does help this figure in my eyes, and as we always say, this is my list. Put your list in the comments down below. But he does look really good from a distance. If you put him on your shelf, you display him on your shelf, man, he looks mean, he looks big, he looks imposing. He's just a little bit hollow when you do grab him and you play with him yourself. But Clayface, still pretty cool. Cool enough to land at number 9 in my top 10 list. All right, we continue on and we continue on. When I was a little kid, I was about 2 years old, and I met the famed actor Dick Van Patten. And Dick Van Patten picked me up and he sat me on his knee and he said, you know what, Kyle? 8 is enough. And that's exactly where we're at on the countdown right here. And number 8, once again, we go to the DC multiverse. We go all the way to ManBat, another DC Batman villain coming into the collection in the Mega Figure line. And this guy, big, imposing, a big man bat. Almost looks like a werewolf, bat / vampire is how this guy looks. And I really do like the looks of him. Once again, a big, chunky figure. The only limitations and one of the issues with him that I have that holds him back a little bit, as he would be much higher on my list if some of the articulation could get worked out, is his legs, unfortunately, do not support his big body. You have to get him just about right, but he has some very weak ankles, unfortunately. But man, is he scary. Man, is he ugly. Man, is he just a big chunk of plastic. And that's what I do like out of my DC figures and my McFarlane figures as well. So, ManBat coming in at number 8. All right, we're at the number 7 spot of my year-end countdown. And number 7, hey, guess what? It's the year of the crocodile. We saw it in G.I. Joe Classified series. Now we see it in the DC Multiverse McFarlane series as we got the Mega Figure Killer Croc. Very cool addition to Killer Croc here. Once again, a big deluxe figure. We're seeing a theme. We're having Batman's Rogue Gallery one after another, it seems like at this point. But very cool looking Killer Croc. Looks like he just escaped from prison with these orange pants on and the collar around his head. Just one of them creepy Batman villains that I wasn't aware of until the Batman in the Animated Series in the 90s. And I always had a special place for Killer Croc. A very cool looking one. Almost looks like a wrestler type figure here is how he looks. He just kind of has that stance to him like he's going to wrestle somebody. But a very cool mega figure. One that kind of came and went like a lot of these mega figures. They don't seem to stay on the shelf very long. So they're obviously very popular. And I can see people wanting Killer Croc because he is a pretty popular Batman villain, as we do know. So Killer Croc coming in at number 7 in my year-end countdown. All right, we're at number 6, and number 6 once again comes from the DC Multiverse line. This is a bit of a late entry here at the end of the year. I think this dropped around the Halloween time frame, and we unboxed it right away because it was part of the Halloween season, and it really did fit in. And as of yet, maybe you guys are different. I don't think I've seen him out in the wild on my figure hunt, so I guess we'll see him more in 2023, I would imagine. But who is it coming in at number 6? Well, it's DC Frankenstein. Very interesting here, as I wasn't even aware until this year DC even had a Frankenstein. So I guess that tells you how in touch I am with the DC comics. It sounds like he's a little bit of a tweener, more on the good guy side in the comic books. But I know my Frankenstein, of course, from the Universal Monsters. And I've always loved Frankenstein type characters. There's been so many Frankenstein movies over the year. And I love some of the really bad ones. Some of the worst movies you've ever seen with terrible Frankensteins. And this guy gives me a little bit of those vibes here. He does look really good. I like the looks of this guy. He's got a trench coat, stitching and stuff. But the big sword is a weapon. I guess they didn't want to give him the gun, as we do know, with Warner Brothers. But something about this guy just comes off as cheesy Frankenstein to me. Now, that's me not knowing the character, things like that. But this brings me back to some of those terrible 70s Frankenstein movies, things like that. Just a very cool one. And I can't wait till I get that accessory pack. I'll get him his correct gun. But something about Frankenstein wielding a sword, just absolutely crazy is what this is. And I really do like this for what it is. For the action figure, it actually is right here. So Frankenstein coming in hot at number 6. All right, here we are at the halfway point. You got your list together? Make sure you put it down in the comments down below, and make sure you subscribe to this very YouTube channel, as we got all kinds of year-end best of lists as we work to find out what was the best action figure of 2022. We got hundreds to go through, as you guys know. So make sure you do subscribe to this very YouTube channel. But now we come to number 5, and number 5 is a bit of a curveball. As I did say, this is all about all McFarlane. This just isn't DC. This just isn't Spawn. Well, we go over to the old Warhammer line, and I know absolutely nothing about Warhammer. I've never played it. I don't know what it is. I thought it was like painted miniatures and things like that. I have no idea what Warhammer really is, but I do know a cool figure when I see one, and this thing is absolutely stunning. This is one of those pieces that I always talk about where you walk into a room and it catches your eye and you focus on. And that's who we got right here. Just a very, very interesting one. Once again, it's from the Warhammer 40,000 line, and I don't even know what that even means, but that doesn't always mean anything. As if you're a kid, you're playing with this, or you're a collector here, you can put this with your Spawn guys. You could be battling Spawn. You could be battling any DC superhero. Heck, you could bring him into Marvel Legends or G.I. Joe. Do whatever you want, but a cool figure is a cool figure, and you don't always have to be bound by rules, as hard as it may be. A little bit of my OCD, I guess, with playing with toys, especially as a kid. I couldn't have crossed him over, and that is one of the biggest regrets I had of my childhood playing days, that I wasn't more open to including different lines together. I think I missed out on some fun that I could have had as a little kid. But this Warhammer one comes in hot at number 5. All right, we're at the number 4 spot in our countdown here. Number 4, we go back to the 90s. Oh, what a time to be alive the 90s were, as some of the greatest comic books for me came out in the 90s. Some of the greatest teams came out in the 90s. Some of the greatest animated cartoons came out in the 90s. And one of my all-time favorite characters came out in the 90s. And I was so happy to see him in the DC Multiverse line this year. Who are we talking about? Well, from the Wildcats, we've got Grifter. I absolutely loved Grifter. I know a lot of people kind of thought of him as a little bit of an X-Men ripoff, with Jim Lee, of course, being a part of X-Men at one time. But there was something about Grifter, something about that Wildcats team that stole young Kyle's heart and never let go. And I never let go of it to this day. So I was very excited to get a Grifter figure in 2022. I would love to get the rest of the Wildcats updated and out there. I just don't think that's probably going to be in the cards, but you never know. I would absolutely love the Wildcats team from McFarlane, but I absolutely do love Grifter. It's just Grifter. This is the Grifter I wanted. Of course, I put him with some guns from that accessory pack. That sword just wasn't going to cut it for Grifter. Grifter's all about the guns at the end of the day. Very, very cool. A lot of people using this head for custom Cobra Commanders with the hood. I've seen a little of that this year, but an all-around really good figure. I was a day one buyer on. He is at clearance at a lot of GameStops if you're playing that long game on him, but I absolutely do love the looks of this Grifter figure. So happy he came out. So happy enough that I put him at number 4 in my top 10 countdown. All right, we're at number 3 in our countdown, and much like WrestleMania 3 being so much larger than life back in the day, our number 3 character carries on a little bit of that tradition, as I always kind of considered him to almost be like a professional wrestler. He does come from the DC Multiverse line. He is a mega figure. He is the mega figure of Bane. And if you were a kid like me back in the 80s and 90s, this was your version of Bane. This is what you think of when you close your eyes at night and you lay your head down and you think of the Bane character. So I was happy to get him in a big deluxe figure this year. Only gripe I had on this one, a very cool figure. Only gripe, could have used a fisted hand, could have used interchangeable hands, would have been great, but we don't see a lot of that with McFarlane, as we know. But at least one fisted hand, I think, would have really worked for this Bane figure. But besides that, this is what I think of when I think of Bane. So they've got this almost absolutely perfect here. Just absolutely do love this Bane figure. Well, another one of those ones that came and went very fast, because I think it is such an iconic character, especially if people around our age, my age, whatever you want to call it out there. So number 3, DC Multiverse Mega Figure, Bane. All right, we're dangerously close to the end as we're at the number 2 spot. And the number 2 spot comes to us from McFarlane Mortal Kombat. And Mortal Kombat figures have been very interesting over the last couple of years with McFarlane Toys. We've had some amazing figures and some figures that quite honestly do miss the mark. But some of the ones we've had recently have really stepped up the game, in my opinion. And number 2 is an absolute game changer. What is it? It is number 2 is Mortal Kombat Spawn. And kind of the joke here on the channel over the last year or two that we've been unboxing these Spawn Mortal Kombat figures is that Mortal Kombat Spawn figures are better than the actual Spawn figures from the actual Spawn line, which is really weird. And this is a perfect Spawn. This is a Spawn that I could see a lot of people buying, saying, I want one representation of the character in my collection. Which one do I need? And I think you can't go wrong with this bad boy right here. Of course, McFarlane did some of those crowdfunding, and he got the deluxe Spawn out there to a lot of people last year. But people like myself that didn't get in on that, missed out on that, whatever you want to say, this is a pretty solid replacement here. This is a very good Spawn. When I close my eyes and I think of Spawn, this is what I think of. It does scale with the other McFarlane Toys figures. The craziness about it is a Mortal Kombat figure. So it's just absolutely wild, absolutely crazy. But no doubt in my mind, this is the best Spawn in the McFarlane line as of right now. And we've had a few other good Mortal Kombat Spawn figures as well. So really interesting how that's all playing out and working out. We'll see what the future holds for Spawn in all of the McFarlane Toys lines in the future. But coming in at number 2 is the Mortal Kombat Spawn. All right, here we are at the number 1 spot, the number 1 McFarlane Toys figure of 2022 as voted by me. Gonna ask you guys one last time, make sure you put your list in the comments down below. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we're counting down all the toy lines that I do collect here on the channel. We're finding a number 1 figure from every one of those lines, and we're gonna put them all into a big old battle royal. We're gonna count down and figure out what is the number 1 figure of 2022. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff to this very YouTube channel. But number 1 goes back to my 80s childhood heart. And the 80s were an interesting time where there was movies, there was TV shows, there was also comic books of this character, and maybe the TV show is the 90s. But let's just play along a little bit. But who is it? This figure came out very early in 2022, stole my heart almost immediately, so much so I had to get the 2 other variants of this character, and he stuck with me all the way to the end as my number 1 McFarlane Toys figure of 2022. Who is it? Oh, it's my boy Swamp Thing. Absolutely love this Swamp Thing. I love that it's a deluxe mega figure as Swamp Thing, one of those characters that is really different sizes depending on what you're watching him in. So I had no problems with him being a mega figure here. I do love the looks of this one. All the crazy grass growing on him, tree branches, all that kind of stuff. It is Swamp Thing to me. Just very iconic, very cool, and really nostalgic for me is what this one is. And of course, as we do know, GameStop came out with an edition as well, where you got a GameStop version. They're basically all the same figures, except we get a little antler ears on this guy over here. That's really the only difference. Tried to mix them up as different as I could, give him the different hand to make him feel a little bit different on my shelf. But boy, oh boy, both these guys really cool. And I said, if I have both these, I should really get this one. And this is kind of the rare edition one, the artist-proof one. Or I like to think of it, Swamp Thing got into the mud, into like the clay mud and stuff like that. That's how I kind of view this Swamp Thing. But you can't go wrong with any of them if you ask me, especially if you're a Swamp Thing fan, especially if you love the old USA TV series, you read the comic books, you love the movies like I did. I remember as a kid, they were always on USA, TBS, WGN, one of those things when I was a kid. I used to always watch the Swamp Thing movies, and then, of course, even the Swamp Thing cartoon was out there, and I wouldn't be opposed to Super 7 coming at us with some Swamp Thing figures in the Ultimate line of the old cartoon. We'll see what happens. Maybe one of these days that might happen. Who knows? But Swamp Thing, an iconic character to me, so much so he came all the way at number 1 in my year-end countdown list of my top 10 favorite McFarlane Toys figures. But what say you one last time? Make sure you put your list in the comments below. Don't forget about my Patreon channel. We can get early access to all these videos. Bonus videos like Q&As, early access to videos, giveaways, you name it. A lot going on the old Patreon channel. And best of all, you do support the channel. You can also support the channel over at ProWrestlingTees.com. And don't forget to follow me along with me on social media at SirPaul64 on Twitter, Instagram, _Kyle_Peterson. So for Swamp Thing and the rest of the McFarlane Toys in 2022, I am Kyle. I'll see you guys all real soon.